Welcome to the program. We are very pleased today to be joined by Jimmy Dore, a comedian, political commentator, also a talk show host, renowned for his satire and critique of foreign policy as well as the media. So, welcome. It's been a while.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So, I guess I was one of the people who had very high hopes for the Trump presidency, as I thought he recognized some of the key problems we had, and also, well, he seemed to suggest some solutions, especially to the wars. This was an important thing. What are your assessments of President Trump so far?
Well, disappointment, mostly. Um, the one bright spot is domestically with his Health and Human Services uh, Director, Robert F. Kennedy. He seems to be doing real work. He's getting chemicals banned, taking cancerous chemicals out of our food supply. He's doing real science on the vaccines and COVID and things like that. And he's trying to get advertisement off our televisions from big pharma, which you don't have in other countries. But foreign policy wise, Donald Trump, there's a saying in the United States, no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain, meaning that Democrats and Republicans all serve the same masters, which they do. And so Donald Trump, he promised famously that he could end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Well, here we are 9 months later, and he's still funding it. Also still funding the genocide in Gaza, which I thought he was gonna end, and, he bombed Iran, which nobody wanted. Nobody no American citizens anyway. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Zionists want that. And now he's also, started bombing boats off the coast of Venezuela under the guise of fighting a drug war, which we all know it's about oil because he tried to overthrow Maduro when he was president in his first term and tried to acknowledge Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela when nobody else did. And so now they've just come up with a new lie, and the new lie is that we're fighting a drug war out of Venezuela. So, um, he also bombed Yemen, right, at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, which he criticized Joe Biden for doing just 1 year before he became president. He was saying this, "You don't have to bomb Yemen, you could solve that with a phone call." He did it anyway. So, yeah, so lots of disappointment all the way around.
Well, this tendency of all presidents to follow the same policy. For some reason, I thought Trump, he seemed very genuine in his opposition, then, especially to the forever wars as well as the proxy war in Ukraine. But there's still these different theories that one, he's just appeasing his hawks, other are suggesting that he joined the hawks. Do you have a theory in terms of where he actually is? Because he seems to be pursuing pursuing strategic ambiguity as a policy of it, or as a tactic at least of its own.
Well, before the election, um, my friend Russell Dobular from Do Dissidents would say, "I don't think that the deep state will allow Donald Trump to become president, and if he does, I have to rethink everything I think about the CIA," but he did become president, and so what that I don't think I have to rethink everything I think about the CIA, but what I have to rethink everything I thought about Donald Trump, and so I think he made some kind of, deal with the deep state and with the intelligence community and the warmongers, because let's remember that the intelligence community doesn't work for the president. The CIA, the NSA, the FBI, they don't work for the president, as Chuck Schumer, who was the leading Democrat at the time in 2016, said so on television, that Donald Trump is really dumb to criticize the intelligence community because they have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you, and what he revealed in that was that the intelligence community doesn't work for the president, and if they don't, then who do they work for? Well, they work for military industrial complex and a handful of billionaires, and so what I think happened with Donald Trump is he made a deal with the deep state, and there's different factions of the deep state, and they fight each other. And for me, the clearest example of that Donald Trump had made some kind of deal with the deep state, or he's working for them or with them, or he's afraid of them, is that he closed down the investigation into his assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. And there's shady things about that assassination attempt, either he was in on it or he's covering it up for the people who did it, because he's either afraid of them or he's working with them now. So that's my assessment, is that Donald Trump changed, and now he's working with the people he vowed to fight against, which is the deep state. I think his heart wanted to, uh, but I don't. I think that he got his mind right, and he got afraid of the right people, and is working with the same people. So that's my theory. That's my guess. I can't think of any other plausible. Why would he shut down the investigation into his assassination attempt? And he's going to pretend it was this again, another lone gunman, a nut, somebody with no footprint on social media, and he was spotted 3 times inside a secured area with a backpack by police, and nobody pursued him. And plus they had a whole different Secret Service crew appointed to him that day, a bunch of 5'4" women instead of 6 foot tall men, and it was just they didn't they didn't have anybody placed on the roof. There's a million things wrong with that assassination attempt. I mean, suspicious, and he doesn't wanna know anything about it. So that's what tells me he's in bed with the people who are wanting to do war.
Yeah, the cutting the ties to the deep state or draining the swamp, as is suggested. I guess that's one of the things his base had really hoped for, though. But he did cut a lot of the funding for USAID and some of these regime change NGOs, or did he reverse this as well?
No, I think he technically did cut that, but in reality, he did not, because what he did. So I don't know. There was like 100 some $1 billion maybe they identified through the Doge program and Elon Musk. But what they did was they didn't cut that money from the US budget. What they did was they added more money. In fact, he gave $200 billion more to the Pentagon, which is the military industrial complex, which is the same people. You have the Pentagon, the CIA. There's, just two sides of the same coin, and they're the ones doing the USAID regime change funding, right? So USAID was under the guise of bringing relief to people and bringing people financial help. In other countries, bringing them aid. They weren't really bringing them aid. They were doing that so they could control them, and so they can fund uh, they can fund coups, and they can fund military, terrorism to rise up against governments so we could overthrow them. And so they just took that money from USAID and they put it right back in to the Pentagon, which is the military industrial complex, which now funds all that stuff. So no, he didn't really get rid of it.
Oh, but one of the concerns for many that looked like it was part of the foundational relationship he had with Musk was this concern about the U.S. going deeper and deeper into debt, and that seems to be in the part of the divorce as well. Given, yeah, when he pursued the big beautiful bill, which was seemingly, well, a bit of a adding to the debt as it was, uh, but where do you see this going now? Because the U.S. government is still in shutdown after they didn't increase the spending. Is the debt now under? Well, I guess it's not under control, but is this becoming a big issue within the U.S.? Is it splitting his base, or how are you assessing this?
Well, it certainly isn't helping to bring cohesion to his base, that's for sure. I don't know if this is splitting his base, but definitely split him and Elon Musk. And I had Steve Bannon on my show, which was his best advisor he had in his first term as president. And he said that, with this whole Doge cutting and the trying to get the waste and fraud and abuse out of government, which was cutting USAID, he said, we'll know if they're really serious about this if they go and start cutting the Pentagon budget, which of course they didn't. They didn't the Pentagon, which has never passed an audit in the history of the Pentagon, meaning they don't know where the money goes that they give the Pentagon, right? So we give the Pentagon now $1 trillion a year, and they don't know how it's being spent. They can't account for it. And so he did not go to the Pentagon. He did not audit the Pentagon. He did not try to cut waste, fraud, and abuse out of the Pentagon. So they were never serious about cutting money and getting the budget under control. And now the big beautiful bill budget is going to explode the deficit even more. And so nobody seems to really care about that. And everybody that I talk to, I'm not an economist but everybody who I talk to who is, and anybody who knows anything about money say that this is unsustainable and that we can't do this forever. And now you see the only reason we can do this is that the American dollar is the reserve currency of the world right now, temporarily still. But there's other power centers cropping up like BRICS, for instance, and they're trying to come up with their own currency so that they don't have to use the U.S. dollars to trade with each other. Let's remember famously that's why they killed Muammar Gaddafi, because he was trying to establish a new a dinar for Africa, so they didn't have to use euros or the U.S. dollar. So no, I don't think it's there's nothing in it for a politician, I think, to cut the budget deficit in the short term. In the long term, there is, but in the short term, you have to cut programs, you have to cut things that people like, and causes pain. So politicians, especially presidents, they're only around for 4 years, maybe eight tops. And so they try to avoid that kind of thing, and it looks like he's going to also. In fact, he's exploding the Pentagon budget, which is exploding the deficit.
Yeah, at the beginning of the Trump presidency, I spoke with Ron Paul. He was also quite eager back then, and it seemed that he also had his hopes for ending the Fed, auditing the Pentagon. So, but yeah, none of this seems to go through. Again, I'm not sure if he was genuine in the beginning. I think he was sincere, so I'm not quite sure what changed. But you did mention um, the BRICS, and well, one can put the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the same box. That is, a lot of the world, the large emerging powers, they're quite concerned about the unsustainable debt in the US and Europe for that sake, and also that it's becoming more and more weaponized. Of course, the Europeans now dipping into the money they seized from Russia is also a key concern. But how is this covered in the US media? The fact that you now have organizations like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization seeking to create alternative centers of technology, new transportation corridors, banks, and using their own currencies, and having more supply chains, I guess, which are more immune from any economic coercion from the West.
Well, there doesn't seem to be any sense of urgency to fix this problem. It's not coming from the media. Certainly, the American people feel that they would like to cut the deficit. They are. What really bothers people in the United States is that there's endless money. Like, they can snap their fingers and send a couple $100 billion to Ukraine, the most corrupt country in all of Europe, with no oversight on how that money's being spent. And yet and they're just printing that money and sending it to them. They're not taxing people. They didn't put a new tax in to raise that money to send to Ukraine, because if they try to do that, the people wouldn't pay it and they revolt. So they just print that money, which is the reason why we can do that, is because we are the reserve currency of the world, and so we send it to them. But at the same time, you would think they would print 100 billion or $200 billion and send it to America to help build our infrastructure, to help build schools and railroads and high-speed trains and libraries and parks and healthcare facilities and urban hospitals, things like that. They don't do that. So we're ending like every empire ends with we're overextending ourselves militarily. We still have over 800 military bases around the world, probably closer to 1,000, because lots of those bases are secret. And so we're ending like all empires end. We're overextending militarily. The billionaires are filling their pockets with the money from the U.S. Treasury, and it's not being replaced. And so we're 38 trillion dollars in debt, with no plan on how to fix that. And meanwhile, they're cutting healthcare here at home. They're cutting Medicaid and Medicare for people, and now they're trying to move up the retirement age. They're doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing, and of course, they're not taking care of their own people, because we live in an oligarchy. This isn't a democracy, and the oligarchs are filling their pockets, with U.S. Treasury.
Yeah, this is usually a concern, though. Once you have a political elite which extracts too much resources from the public, you will have, well, I guess more of the public with being less vested in the maintaining the status quo. But do you see any social, not well, social uprising? Maybe too much, but any any organized? Well, yeah, let's go with uprising, or is
What
it?
the
Sorry.
what the establishment's very good at. You would think that's what happens, right? So when the political class, robs too much money from the country, the people are supposed to rise up. But what they're very good at is, propaganda and manipulation of the electorate, of the citizenry. So they know how to split people. So if you divide, you can conquer. So that's what they do. That's this whole left-right divide, which is phony. It's a false divide because most people agree on a lot of things, but they have to keep you hating half the country and the other half of the country hating the other half of the country. So we're distracted and hating each other instead of coming together around common interests to oppose the oligarchy and rise up against their fleecing of Americans, the Treasury, U.S. Treasury. So that they're very good at it. And one of the big key things is that they own the media, right? So there used to be in the United States 50 giant media companies that were very big. And in 1996, Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, which then consolidated those 50 giant media companies into six. So there's only six media companies, and a Zionist just bought one sixth of it. Right, he bought Paramount, which includes Warner Brothers, CNN, Comedy Central, and now they also have TikTok. So they're very good at the propaganda to divide people, which keeps people suspicious and hating their neighbor instead of joining with their neighbor around common interests to oppose the oligarchy, which is what's necessary. So they're very good at it. They even, the way they staged the Charlie Kirk assassination was exactly right in their playbook. So the left and the right were coming together around rejecting the greater Israel project and rejecting Benjamin Netanyahu and Zionism, what they're currently doing. So the left and the right were coming together around that. And so the way to try to split that, they do this assassination and they blame it on a trans lover, right? They said they try to make it out that it was this lefty person who's doing left wing hate on right wing. And so some people fall for that, and it keeps people divided and keeps people hating each other instead of realizing the game being played by the establishment and the oligarchs. Because this was not a not a lone gunman that whatsoever. That guy probably didn't even pull the trigger. It wasn't the guy that they have. So this was a hit job. This was a professional hit job, and a lot of people are speculating that it came from the intelligence community. So, and they know how to perfectly divide Americans, divide and conquer, and so that's what I think is keeping people from coming together, because once they do, they will rise up.
Yeah. Well, you probably followed in Europe. The social situation isn't too great either, with a lot of political instability. But um, well, often one looks towards the United States as well, with the constitutions and the legal framework. It provides more rights, or at least we think so. But the more recent development now, with Trump announcing that the military should guard U.S. Cities, or they can, well, putting the military within the U.S. cities to restore order. He had a tweet with, well, they referred to, I think it was Portland, as a war zone. Uh, is this just, you know, big language on Twitter, or are we seeing, the use of military in a serious way on U.S. soil?
Well, a lot of people think that he's turning the cities into war zones. And so, a theory out there, which is compelling, is that Donald Trump is definitely doing it, over the top, where he's bringing in. It looks like he's turning American cities, bringing in soldiers dressed up like they're in a war zone in Baghdad or Afghanistan or Syria, but they're not. They're on the clean paved streets of Chicago, right? And so they do these over the top, aggressive policing actions, where they'll use, Black Hawk helicopters and and they'll have soldiers rappel into an apartment building and then break in the doors of everybody and put them all in handcuffs and wheel them out of the building, some people naked, a lot of them are citizens. They even handcuffed a city council member at a hospital, in Chicago, and so, one of the theories is that the reason why they're doing this over the top, show of force is to, create a backlash so that they can create, more violence from the people that they're over policing, and then they could use that as an excuse to ramp up their surveillance state through Palantir, and that theory seems to make a lot of sense to me, because Donald Trump is ramping up the surveillance state, and, he and that which is exactly anathema, that's the exact opposite of what his base wants. But just like it was Barack Obama, a lefty who saved the banks at the behest of the citizens, the homeowners, just and gave us a, corporate-friendly, a big pharma-friendly, health insurance-friendly healthcare plan instead of a left-wing healthcare plan. They had to have Barack Obama do that, right? Because when he's doing it, it silences the natural opposition to that, which is the left. Now they'll have him, Donald Trump ramp up their surveillance state, and that calms down the natural opposition to that, which is the right. The right are against that kind of stuff. They're more for local control, against surveillance states. So it seems like a big plan. That's what it certainly seems like. And when you see protests in America, especially around immigration, a lot of people speculate that though both sides are being funded by billionaires to further their own ends. So that would be what Donald Trump is definitely doing an over the top show of force in these cities, bringing in military and bringing in National Guard and ICE dressed up like they're in the military, and they're wearing masks over their face, which is again contrary to U.S. policing. And it's to let's create a reaction, so then he can use that reaction to ramp up their surveillance state.
With all these issues coming together, there's a lot of yeah, discontent within his especially for the America Firsters in the MAGA base. But it looked like the one thing that could bring down Trump, the one that besides yeah, putting Israel ahead of the United States, the one thing that seemed to bring bring the well, what could bring Trump down was the Epstein issue. That is, it he seemed to very desperately trying to get it out of the media. The focus is specifically saying so. Why do you keep reporting on this issue? But it did eventually disappear out of the media, or is it just maybe for us standing on the outside? Is all pressure on the Epstein files gone by now?
No, in fact, it's still ramping up. The reason why Thomas Massey, who's a very outspoken congressman, he said the real reason why the government is still shut down is because he has enough votes to force the release. He needed 218 votes in the Congress to force the executive branch, the Trump administration, to release the Epstein files. And so they uh, Thomas Massey has asserted that that's why the government is actually shut down. And the many people in his administration ran on the Epstein, releasing the Epstein files and complete transparency, meaning Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. Those would be the two loudest voices screaming about the Epstein files. They're now in control of the FBI and the Epstein files, and they are now lying to everybody, saying that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Everyone knows they're lying about that, and that there was no conspiracy of trafficking children, which everyone knows they're lying about that. And he said that they say they're also not working with any intelligence agencies, which is everyone knows they're lying about that. And Donald Trump, people say they're doing it at the behest of Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump is doing it at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu and his donors, right? So that's what this is about. Donald Trump has handlers. He's not the boss. He has bosses, and the Epstein case, the Epstein files prove that he has bosses, and so that's why he's trying to cover it up. But it's not happening. People are still talking about it. Release the Epstein files, and he tries to create lots of distractions, and that's maybe another reason why. Going back to your previous question of why he's doing such an overwhelming show of force in these cities, is that it's another distraction. He's trying to change the subject away from the Epstein files and away from Gaza and his subservience to Benjamin Netanyahu in the state of Israel. He's trying to change that, and it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. He wants to change the subject, and that's what he's trying to do. So, yeah, he's still trying to cover it up, but it's not going away thanks to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey.
Well, to his credit, he's quite good at managing the media, it seems, though. But with the Epstein files, I thought at some point they were making the argument that there were no Epstein files, that this was,
Yes.
but are the Epstein files are now back? It's acknowledged, or is their mere existence still disputed?
No, they try to, well, Pam Bondi, the attorney general, Donald Trump, they're all trying to pretend that there are no Epstein files, but of course Donald Trump has admitted that there are, that his name appears in the Epstein files. And he said he did that on a radio show, and he said that, not everything in the Epstein files is true, he said, especially the stuff about me. So, again, that was a gaffe, because he told the truth. The truth was that he's in the Epstein files and that the Epstein files exist, and now they're all trying to say that, and so now everybody from the, administration is trying to say they don't exist, but, of course, everybody knows they do, including 218 members of Congress who are ready to vote to compel the administration to release the Epstein files. It'll never happen.
Well, with this, media with their own focus, what do you think are the most important political issues versus what the media actually focuses on, or is the media concentrated on many of these issues?
I mean, the media might concentrate on the right issues, but they don't tell you the truth about them, right? Like like right now Donald Trump is trying to overthrow Venezuela again. And, of course, the media covers it, but, of course, they cover it as a mouthpiece to the establishment, right? And they don't tell you the truth about what's actually happening. They repeat all the propaganda coming from the establishment about why we should be trying to overthrow Venezuela. So, I mean, the media's focus, it doesn't really matter what their focus is, because they're never gonna report it, honestly, truthfully, or factually. So, let's remember, as Noam Chomsky and Ed Herman taught us, that the media is not there to inform us. The media is there to manufacture consent for the policies of the oligarchs, and that's what they always have done, that's what they always will do, and that's why shows like this exist, because, it's an antidote to that propaganda.
Well, actually, yeah, that takes me nicely to my last question because shows like yours and generally, yeah, political comedy, they do have an important societal role. That is, when you see, yeah, society becoming more polarized, more pressure and censorship on the media, uh, one often gets the impression that, yeah, political comedians and satire, it has more freedom of speech, if you will. I mean, even going back to in ancient Greece with Greek comedy, they had yeah, this important societal role. Do you see it still serving this role, or have many comedians and people in your line of job been captured by the, I guess, the political forces they serve? Because these days you also see comedians being censored. Was it Kimmel? Was the last one was off, then back on again?
Yeah, Jimmy Kimmel is a propagandist, and most comedians. So certainly, any comedian with a talk show or on mainstream corporate news is a propagandist, right? They have to serve the establishment, and if they don't, they get rid of them, right? So let's remember that MSNBC, a major cable news outlet in the United States, fired Phil Donahue for not for lying when he had, but for telling the truth about the Iraq War. And so they did that with Jesse Ventura, the Ashley Banfield, a lot of people. There's a long history of people doing that, and they then immediately fired 3 Arab, news, hosts on MSNBC after October 7th, and the Israel-Gaza conflict had started or heated up. So they're not there uh, to tell you the truth. They're there to lie to you about it. And, now, can you what was the question again? I forgot what it was right in the middle of answering it.
Oh, the extent to which, yeah, comedians still
Oh,
play their traditional roles they did in the
pointless.
past.
Yeah, I've been very I was always proud to be part of the comedy community because we always push back against the establishment. We always poke holes in the status quo. And but that has really changed. It certainly changed during COVID. They became mouthpieces for the establishment and big pharma and the government, and they shamed people for questioning authority, which is the exact opposite of what comedy is supposed to do. And thank God for people like Joe Rogan who still understand that and look at all the flack he takes for actually questioning the establishment. And he was right about everything, but it certainly changed when Donald Trump got elected the first time. A lot of comedians fell for the propaganda 100% and just repeated. They repeated Russiagate, which was a complete fabrication made up by the intelligence community and the Clinton campaign, and then it repeated by the media and in collusion, right? Or in conspiracy with the media. So most comedians who talk about politics had their political awakening when Trump became elected, and they don't really know anything. They don't know anything except what they're told in the newspapers, by the establishment, oligarch-owned, billionaire-owned media, and they repeat it. They just they vomit it back up, and it's kind of disgusting. So people like Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, all those people. They're Bill Maher included. They're all just they wouldn't be there if they didn't serve the oligarchy. They're there because they're propagandists, and they might even believe the stuff they're saying. But if they believe something else, they wouldn't be there, as Noam Chomsky has taught us very well. So I think there are a handful of just a small handful of comedians that are still being true to the real mission of comedy. Come on, comedians are supposed to always, the jumping off point for George Carlin was the media's that the government is lying, and that's the how I practice comedy. I know the government is lying, and I just have to figure out where. And they don't do that. They're very but most comedians nowadays, just like the country, they've been very effectively propagandized to see things through a left and right narrative, and they think they're on the good side. So and their side is the right side, and then they write all their jokes from that point of view, which is a mistake. And so there's only a very small few people who see through that kind of propaganda and see it as it's not left right, it's top down, it's us against them. And but most comedians take the bait, and certainly television comedians are only there because they serve the oligarchs.
Yeah, 20 years ago, Stephen Colbert, he was the funniest guy, the,
Yep.
the role he played, but I don't recognize the new Steve Colbert though. It's very different character.
It's like he's doing a caricature of the of he's playing the character that he used to make fun of, and now he's that guy. He used to make fun of people like that, propagandists and establishment hacks, and now he is that. He's a propagandist and an establishment hack.
By the way, I just want to say I'm a huge fan of the Jimmy Dore Show, so I can't recommend it enough. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.